Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Blue Outpost Texas Democrats Candidate Forum. I'm Mike Collier. I'm delighted to be with you again today. I hope you had a terrific day. Election day is 1 week from today, and I think if you're like me, you spent most of the day thinking about what it was like 4 years ago on Election Day. I remember thinking to myself that we really weren't supposed to ever have another Republican president. They had been so not responsive to our needs for so long, relying on spin and nonsense and con job. And I thought that we would never have another Republican president again until they found the world's greatest con artist in Donald Trump. And I know that's pretty harsh language, but that's really what we're talking about, in my opinion. He's a good con man, but he's not a great con man. And the reason why he's not great is because many of us see the con. And in a week's time, we're going to do something about it. Now, we can't take anything for granted. I think this race is going to be a lot closer than people think. And we must treat this thing as if we're 10 points down with 2 days to go, and put everything we've got into it, because our nation really depends on our success here. There are a lot of people that are working so hard. I'm working as hard as I possibly can. And, I don't seem to run out of energy. I'm sure I'm going to sleep like a baby on November 4th, but not until then, because we've got to win this, and so much rides on it. So thanks again for joining us. Today, we have a very interesting and very important program, because we're going to be hearing from Hispanic leaders here in the state of Texas. And we all know how important the Hispanic community is to democracy in our state. And we all know that it's growing in importance. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to think very, very carefully about what are the hopes and dreams and fears and expectations of that very important group of Texans. I know from campaigning, my first campaign was in 2014 when I ran for comptroller, and we didn't perform well. We certainly did not perform well in the Hispanic community. And then somebody had a novel idea, and they said, Mike, why don't you go ask? Why don't you just go ask? Why aren't we performing well? And that was the beginning for me of an around the state tour, to call it a listening tour, to figure out why did we perform so badly. And I spent as much time as I possibly could in the company of Democrats around the state, including many members of the Hispanic community all over the state. And what I heard consistently, time and time again, is that people vote when they think there's a reason to vote. And people will believe there's a reason to vote when the people that are asking for their vote are concerned about what they're concerned about. And what they're concerned about, and they told me, is education, jobs, healthcare, retirement security, all of those things. And so the question is, just like everyone else, but the question is, are we delivering on that promise? Do we spend enough time in the Hispanic community? Those of us that aren't Hispanic, do we spend enough time in the Hispanic community building those relationships, earning trust? A lot of it is trust. And we also know that coming around a month before Election Day, promises does not a relationship make. It must be consistent. And when you do happen to get elected, I haven't been elected yet. I shouldn't even say yet. I've never held office. But if I ever do get elected, it's not coming around every 4 years. It's coming around every day. It's building relationships in the community and making sure that you know what their hopes and dreams and fears are, just like any other community, and delivering the goods. And to some extent, there's a language challenge. But, I've been studying Spanish. I think it's la idioma más bonito de todas. And I wish I could spend more time practicing it. So I'm not going to embarrass myself any more than perhaps I've already done. But the main thing here is that if we don't do right by our wonderful friends in the Hispanic community, then we don't deserve to hold office. It's as simple as that, which is why tonight is such an important night, because we're going to hear some very impactful, wonderful leaders in the Hispanic community. And we're going to have a wonderful hour plus talking to them and learning and listening. So, but before we get into that, let's look at thank our sponsors, which we do each time. First of all, our sponsors: 312th Family District Court Judge Clinton Chip Wells, 270th Civil District Court Judge Deidre Davis. Thank you so much. Our club sponsors: Bayou Blue Democrats, Meyerland Area Democrats, Texas Democratic Women, Harris County Chapter, Houston Stonewall Young Democrats, Southwest Democrats, Cy-Fair area Democrats, Humble area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, Energy and Environmental Democrats, Road Women, Cypress Tomball Democrats, Kingwood area Democrats, the Spring Democratic Club. Thank you to our club sponsors and our royal sponsors, former county clerk and my friend, Dr. Diane Troutman, Carl Jones, Humble area Democrat President John Cotter. Thank you so much. And our Sapphire sponsors, Texas Senate District 3, Committeewoman Shirley Layton, Texas Senate District 7 Democrats, and attorney Mark Whitehead. And our organizational sponsors, Powered by People, Harris County Democratic Party, Flip the Texas House, Sisters United Alliance, Swing Left Texas, Indivisible Houston, and Blue Action Democrats. And owing to the fatigue of 18 months of trying to win this election, I left somebody out. I think I left out my friend Carl Jones, and I certainly didn't mean to do that. Thank you very much. So thank you to the sponsors, and thank you for everyone who's here this evening, and for everyone who's listening, and all the work that we're putting into basically saving our democracy, which is what the next 7 days are all about. All right. So now, usually I have two hosts to introduce to you. One, Carly Mosier's not available. So it's going to land on the square and strong shoulders of my good friend, Jaime Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mike. And stick around. I think you'll enjoy this for a little bit. Anyway, I know you've got other things you got to do tonight, a wife who has expectations of you and whatnot. And so, but stick around. This is going to be a fun conversation, if you don't mind.
Well, I would be delighted to, because like I say, often, maybe not every politician on the planet thinks this way, but sometimes it's better to listen than to speak, because that's how you learn. So I would be delighted to stay and listen very carefully.
Great, great. And your attempt at Spanish was very well done. We understood that you liked the Spanish language as one of the most beautiful languages. So we were able to
okay, so you caught that? Yeah, estoy aprendiendo desde hace 3 años.
Wow, well, for 3 years, that's very good. Very excellent.
Yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
The attempt is appreciated. And I think a lot of times candidates don't realize that whatever community you go to, if you'll just attempt to reach out to that community, it's appreciated. And so,
well, I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to speak to one another, show a sign of respect, as you say. It's also fun. I mean, that's one of the things I love about our state is our diversity. Our diversity makes this state so wonderful. And you know, when I'm campaigning and traveling around the state, that's probably the best part. And you know, I have so much fun in the most joyful community that I can think of, which is the Hispanic community. And I'd like to be able to speak in their language.
Yeah.
I just wish I was more intelligent than I am. No tengo suficiente inteligente.
No, excellent. Okay, so why don't we bring on our guests for the evening, and let's have this conversation.
Terrific.
We're going to start with Rico Garcia, who's from McAllen, Texas, from the Valley, South Texas. Howdy, Rico. Let me introduce everybody, and then we'll give you each a chance to introduce yourselves. Okay. And then we're bringing on Eddie Morales, who's running for State House of Representatives in District 74 down in Eagle Pass. And then we have Vilma Morera, who is from Houston. She is a Hispanic organizer, expert extraordinaire, GOTV expert. We'll get a lot of insight from her. And a little later on in the show, we'll have one more guest who's a Hispanic city council member in a small town in East Texas. And we'll see her perspective from that. She's on a meeting right now. I know she's on a board meeting right now, but as soon as she gets off, she'll come join us. So we'll see how that works. But anyway, so welcome, everybody. Why don't we tell you the format of tonight? What we'll do is we'll give each of the three of you 1 minute to just introduce yourselves to the audience. And that way we'll kind of get up to speed of who you are. Then we'll just kind of have a conversation over the next hour. At 8 o'clock, our audience members will be asking you questions. So audience, it's up to you. If you go to Blue Outpost TX Democrats, Blue Outpost TX Democrats on Facebook, find us, watch the show there. I don't know if you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter right now, but if you can, go to the Facebook version and ask your questions there throughout the next hour and a half, and we will ask those questions at around the 8 o'clock hour. But in the meantime, we have a conversation to have. And Rico, why don't we start with you? We'll give you 1 minute. I've got the official stopwatch here. Just tell us who you are and why you were invited to be on the show tonight.
Absolutely. It's quite the honor to be here tonight. So again, my name is Rico Garcia. I'm an attorney down here in the Rio Grande Valley in McAllen, Texas. Me and a few friends a few years ago, we started this organization called Statewide, Texas. In short, we're hyper focused on getting out the vote of low propensity voters down here. This is the result of us recognizing that our region underperforms pretty substantially in the voter turnout realm. It's something that plagues the Latino community as a whole in Texas. So we figured if we tried it out, we figured out applying some applied election kind of concepts, scientific concepts to the ways that we do it down here. That maybe we figure something out. We're still in the figuring out phase, but in short, it's pretty simple. We go out and we talk to folks. We see what it is. The way Mr. Carter, you hit the nail on the head there. Folks just want to be communicated with. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. And when you communicate to them the language that they're speaking, whether it's actually the language or the tone, it can be effective. So we're looking forward to talking about things like that.
Good. And Eddie, we'll give you the minute.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for providing me with a forum for tonight. My name's Eddie Morales. I'm a product of Eagle Pass, Texas. I'm a product of the colonias here on the border. When I was 12, 13 years old, my parents had a great opportunity to open up a tortilla factory here in Eagle Pass and take over it. And that's really been the biggest example of all the lessons that I've learned in my upbringing, from stretching a dollar, handling customers, working with customers, working with managing employees, and just understanding the overall basics of what it means to run a small business. I went to the University of Texas with a government degree and graduated with a government degree and 2 minors in business and Spanish. I then went to St. Mary's Law School. I started at a law firm when there was 13 attorneys back in 2000. We are now 73 attorneys and 8 offices. I run the Eagle Pass office. And this is the first time that I'm running for office. I was successful in the Democratic primary that involved 2 other candidates with much more name recognition. And we were able to win without a runoff, which was very surprising to some folks in Texas. And we're just ready to move forward and hopefully win on next Tuesday, November 3rd.
Great, and congratulations for getting through the runoffs that way, through the primaries that way. Great. Vilma, you're up next.
Hi, my name is Vilma Morera. I'm in Houston, Texas, originally from Dominican Republic. I'm a director of organizing with Houston Federation of Teachers. And the most thing that I love to do is getting people out to vote. So that's actually where I spend most of the time, just going, like Rico said, on those low density prepared people that come out and vote. Like, just let them know how important they are and go out and vote. So that's my main job to do, be out there, let them know, taking it to the polls, and also running most of the campaign on the Latino community here in Houston, where you get to go and reach out to those people that never get maybe touched or never know how important they are. So that's actually what I do here in Houston and on the Latino community most of the time.
And Vilma's being modest. She runs the Hispanic community for all the big Democrats. If you're running for Congress in Houston, you have to go through her, or you didn't get to the Hispanic community. So Sheila Jackson Lee owes her, and Sylvia Garcia owes her, and Al Green and Jean Green and all those people owe her a great debt. So, and Houston does too. So good. Okay, well, so the introduction is out of the way. Mike, do you have any first questions that maybe I didn't prepare you to ask any questions, but do you have a first thought that you might want to ask?
I do, yeah, and thank you. I probably only have time for one question, but
okay.
Once I have grasped the answer, I'm going to be a much wiser man. But I have been told, I don't know if this is a fact, but I have been told that whereas in Texas we have an under turnout in the Hispanic community, that is not the case in other states. And so it is not a cultural thing, but it has something to do with how we're organized and how we approach the challenge. Is that true? And what do you think we can learn from that?
So why don't we go ahead and go in kind of a round robin order? Since we started with Rico last time, let's start with Eddie this time. So Eddie?
Well, what I've been seeing in Maverick County, I'm based out of Maverick County, and there's also a lower voter turnout than what we anticipated. And what I can attribute that, even to our sister city 50 miles away from us, which is Del Rio, is that none of the school board elections that also run concurrent with the general election had any candidates. They all ran unopposed, all the existing members. And so I think that led to a downturn in voter turnout here in Maverick County. We're finally over 20%, but Del Rio, for example, is at 26% already in voter turnout, and they're really happy. Usually we're the highest vote getters here in Maverick County, but we're slowly, getting up there. So it's been about messaging, getting on social media, getting on the radio and explaining to them, showing pie charts. If you go to my campaign page on Morales for Texas or on Facebook, it's something to say it, but it's something else to actually visualize it for the audience and show them on a pie chart how many in Maverick have voted, which is a very slim narrow, and then actually how many are still left that can vote. And that received a lot of responses. And I think then we were able to see it on Saturday when we were able to receive over 1,023 votes when the norm was anywhere from 500 to 700. So I think it's just about the messaging, letting the public know why it's important.
Very localized then.
Having contested races locally, which will drive the voter turnout.
Vilma, do you see the voter turnout differently in Hispanics in Texas versus other places?
Yes, totally. I used to live in Providence, Rhode Island, way long time ago. And when I came down to Texas, I saw that difference. But I think through the years, it been increasing the voters on the Latino. But one of the things that I usually have issue is how you're going to inform the voter, what you're going to let them know, how important they are. Because if you don't make that point, most of the people, when you go and knock on the door, it's okay, I don't have to vote. My daughter vote. No, you have to make your vote count. You have to come and vote. You're going to make the difference. Because sometimes they think a vote doesn't make a difference. It do make a difference. And I can say in my own family, like, I was like, Mommy, do you vote? No, you have to go and vote. Like right now, come on, because your vote's going to make the difference. And to have the right people who are going to represent us. So yes, I have seen the difference. And through the year, I think we're getting more into the Latinos community, and they're getting, I have seen the difference. That's definitely.
Rico, what are your thoughts?
We have a lot of way to go.
So this, Mr. Collier, your question is on point. It's one that has plagued me, and is one of the original reasons as to why I started this organization. It is insane to me that down here or throughout the state of Texas, we are the same culture, right, in a lot of ways, but our brethren in other states voted much higher turnout in much higher rates, and I've never really understood why. And what's crazy is that even so, I'm here in McAllen, about 15 minutes south of me is Reynosa. They have incredibly high turnout rates there as well. Many of us, my family included, are from Reynosa, right across the river. And I don't know what it is. We get here, and all of a sudden we don't really have that kind of connection. And I haven't figured it out completely, but what I will say is this is my theory, and it's very much what Mr. Morales mentioned. Kind of what I mentioned before is you have to talk to them, right? You have to communicate with them, and you have to feel like they care about what you're about to vote for. That's what Ms. Morales said as well. And I think when you mentioned Morales, Mr. Eddie, you mentioned the local races having an impact, because the local races actually care. Like, people care about their school board. That impacts their day-to-day life. And we're talking about councilman, day-to-day life. And those people are in everyone's face, more, maybe not in an abrasive way, but they're there, they're present, they're talking about things that matter. And those voters feel connected to that election, and then they go and vote. So when there's an absence of these local races, there's a downturn in the vote. Fortunately, here in Hidalgo County, a lot of our stuff because of COVID got moved from May to November. So we're seeing an uptick in our voting, and I think it's right on point right there. And I think you need to look past that there's a signal and noise. You got to look to what it is specifically. And my theory is that it's when we talk to them, based on an infrastructure that's been built. So there's another thing right there too. Local races have an infrastructure in place, and they fire it up. The machine gets fired up and it gets rolling for every single local race because people care. There's outcomes. There's things that result from the way that these local elections turn out. So people care from the top to bottom, right? My grandma cares substantially about what's going on with the school board, but she kind of doesn't really, it's a little different to her about what's going on with the presidential. And that difference right there is what we got to hone in on. Something I'm really passionate about, so I won't go on for much longer, but yeah.
Well, and I'll give you another big difference. In Mexico, for example, voting is compulsory. It's mandatory. And the way that they handle that is that the unions, los sindicatos, the unions go out to the neighborhoods with buses and they pick everybody up and take them to the polls. So if you go up north in the United States where there are strong unions, the Hispanic community is more likely to vote with the union support. In Texas, where the unions are not as strong, the unions are not out there in the neighborhoods taking people to the polls. And so you miss out on that opportunity. I mean, the community is used to having the unions take them and hold their hands, and that's not happening in Texas.
Well, it's two things. I mean, it's not just that a union takes you, because that is huge, of course. That's an infrastructural part. But it's that the union is connecting something that you do every single day, your job, your livelihood, connects that, something you touches your everyday life with an election. And that right there is what at least a lot of Texans, but certainly the Latino community in Texas doesn't have that connection right there, right? That's something to connect my day-to-day life with this election. And why do I care? Who do I care about? Who's doing it for me and all that stuff? And then, then the infrastructure, right? My buddy getting me on the bus and going and doing all that. So,
well, and Mike, that goes back to something you were saying earlier, the kitchen table issues. I mean, jobs is one of the kitchen table issues. And so if you can connect that message to this community, then you've got a winning message. And for some reason, Democrats have not been good at connecting the message of jobs to anybody, not only the Hispanic community, but to anybody. They really don't come off as the job creators. And so that's a problem.
If I can just throw in, and then I'm going to have to say goodnight, but if I can just throw in one observation for my campaigning is we haven't had a statewide victory in a long, long time. So if you are in the Hispanic community anywhere in Texas, you don't really have the slightest interest in what Democrats have to say who are running for statewide office, but we will. I think we'll have at least one statewide officer in 7 days. Whoever is the first Democrat to hold statewide office is going to hear from me once a day. What have you done today? Not election year, not 4 years. What have you done today to go into the Hispanic community and make sure that you know each other, that you're listening and that you're serving? Because as soon as we have a statewide candidate who understands that and spends 4 years cultivating those relationships, making sure we deliver the goods. If it's jobs we're worried about, then make sure we work on that. If it's healthcare, make sure we work on that. When we finally have a statewide officer who earns the trust of the Hispanic community in the state, then that will change everything, I think. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Are y'all in agreement with that? Is that the big? Yeah.
No,
so MJ is going to hear from me, our first statewide officer, and Krista Castaneda, and we got a handful of fabulous judges. They're all going to hear from me on November 4th. Now that you've punched through, here's what I expect of you.
Well, one thing that I want to add, I totally agree with you, but not just on election day, like you just said, we have to always keep continuing that communication relationship with the community. That way they remember when they need to go and vote for you. Because sometimes they just get to listen. Oh, they knock on my door once every 2 years. Let's keep that relationship with our community and statewide. It could be a message. It could be a phone call. It could be something. They know you're there for them. That's one of the things that is most important.
Yeah.
You're on the right track. I know you got to go. Thanks for hanging out.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's good visiting with you.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful evening.
Great.
Thank you.
Let's go win this.
Yep.
Good idea. See you, Mike. Okay. So now y'all know Mike. He's a great guy, and we're going to see a lot more from him in the future. Of course, he doesn't want us to talk about that until after Tuesday, and so let's focus on Tuesday, right? What can we do this week to change the Hispanic mindset and to get some more Hispanic votes out? And I know that's a big question, but Vilma, let's start with you on that one. So,
communication. Call them, knock on their door, drop a lead, let them know how important is they vote. I think it's the only way is to make them to go out and vote is to let them know that we need their vote. What way is the easiest way? Like right now, due to COVID-19, I think everybody to keep the safe situation, but at least drop something on the door, giving a phone call, like have somebody drop a piece of lead, like we need you, beat someone at the polling location, remind them who are, because now with that there's not just down the ballot that you can say all Democrat, like you have to let them know who are the candidate, because a lot of people get confused as well on that. So I think it's just communication and keep everybody on track. Like you have vote, if not, make the plan for them. If they need a ride, give them the ride. Like you were saying earlier, like up north, and I said, I used to go with my union people to vote, but it's a culture down here in Houston that we have to change. It's gonna take some time. We're working on it. And I said, as a union member and a union employee, we're working on it. It's gonna take time because it's totally a different culture.
And Rico?
So I think you're correct there, Vilma. But I mean, one thing that I think Voto Latino did like a study on it, and it's really impactful and it's clear. When people that you know are going to vote and they kind of put it out there, it becomes just kind of it builds on itself, right? So I think one thing everyone can do is, if you voted, I mean, you've even seen it, share that you voted and share like, hey, I voted here. It took me 20 minutes. It was actually really easy. I didn't have to wait in line. It was great. Anyone have any questions, DM me or something, give me a call. And there's like, I don't want to throw out the stat, but it was a statistically significant impact on one person doing that has an impact on their friend group, and it kind of snowballs, right? And that's just, that makes sense, I'm sure, to all of us inherently, because that's just kind of naturally the way a lot of us will learn stuff, right? And as you applying our social media kind of instincts that we've kind of all developed over the past few years to spread out a message. So I would think one of the things is, don't be afraid to share that you voted, right? And don't be coy about it.
Eddie?
Definitely communication, messaging. In my UT undergrad days, I had a great business professor that taught us our marketing class, not even looking at the book. It was The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and knowing yourself, knowing your enemy. And I implemented that same sort of policy with respect to this campaign, never having run for office, always being the one behind the scenes. I knew that eventually I would end up with a Republican opponent, and so I needed to understand and know what their tactics were going to be so that I could use them to my advantage. We all know that the Republicans try to use the rhetoric that they're pro-law enforcement, that's their mantle that they hold on to. I took that away when I received the endorsement from the Texas Municipal Police Association and from CLEAT, the two biggest law enforcement organizations in Texas. I knew that the oil and gas industry is huge for District 74. For those viewers that don't know District 74, it starts here in Eagle Pass in Maverick County and goes to the outskirts of El Paso. It's the biggest district not only in Texas, but in the United States. And I mean, we are heavily reliant on oil and gas in Pecos and Reeves County and all of the production that it generates and the revenue that it generates to Austin. And so knowing that, I also fought to make sure that we were able to get the TXOGA, Texas Oil and Gas Association, PAC endorsement. And it's through those efforts that I think I took away their arguments and being able to communicate effectively that message through not only social media, but also in doing block walking. We even did block walking last week. We have a phone bank system with 5 ladies that, making calls all over District 74. And then we're having, for example, this Saturday, we still want to be involved. My consultants tell me, hey, we're looking pretty good. The numbers look good, but we want to let up. We keep running like we're on second place. There's a Halloween event that we're going to hold through a drive-through, understanding that there's a pandemic, through a drive-through at the lake, so that we can have all these safety protocols in place. But you're just staying out there and being with the community, still being involved. And then lastly, to those viewers, buy a tortilleria, and that way you can meet on Sundays with all of your customers that are going and buying barbacoa and tortillas and menudo and tamales and carnitas and all that good stuff, because, the trust that your voters need to have for you to be able to go out and vote, you can't build that overnight. And like Mike is implementing, going out there on a regular basis with the Hispanic community so that they can see him as a friend, not a foe. That is the way to do it. You establish trust, through years of them seeing you and having a hard work ethic and knowing that they can trust you when it comes time to visit with you on the issues.
And taking the candidates out to the ranchito and have a cabrito over a little flame and right. These are the cultural kinds of things that we want our candidates to participate with us in. No?
Exactly. Breaking bread.
I mean, it's a common theme, right? Interesting. Vilma, so what kinds of things do you advise candidates right away? On day one, when you get there, what are you telling candidates? What do you have to do to court this community?
Definitely the first thing, do they know what the Hispanic community is in the district? Have they been reached out to them? Like, especially like Eddie was saying, do an event where you get to meet the people around you. So the first thing, that's the block walk. The candidate have to block walk. Like, literally, they have to go and knock the doors because they need to know who the voters are. The voter needs to know who's the candidate. Even though you can have 20 paid canvassers, you need to be out there and meet your community and know who you are. That way they know who you are and they know. And that's, I think, you have to build that communication relationship. I know not the candidate doesn't have the time to go to every single house, but at least tía le dijo al tío, oh, I saw Eddie Morales knock on my door today. Oh, ¿te visitó mi hija? Sí, vino a verme hoy, Eddie Morales, a pedirme su voto. That tía already called the whole family and let them know that Eddie Morales knocked on the door.
Yeah.
That makes a difference.
That's building the buzz. Yeah. Rico, what do you tell candidates when they first come to talk to you about courting this community?
Well, it's a little unique for us in that in the Rio Grande Valley, the Latino community is the community. And we're one and the same here. We're about 99% Latino here, and then everyone else, it's like we're de facto. So it's not about courting the Latino community specifically as it is just leading the community in its own right? And so then it becomes really narrow and it becomes really specific. Like, what are we going after? Why are you better? What are you doing? How hard are you working? And how hard you're working really just means, like what you just mentioned, Vilma, is, are you knocking on these doors? And when you do, are you touching the whole family? Are you making an impression when you do? I think the difference is like now it's not a tia that calls all the rest. What they do is, I think a lot of us have these very, very large group texts, family group texts, and somebody will take a picture of the lit that gets dropped and says like, look what I just got on my door. And then we all kind of share about it. And that's what I think, so, okay, but what do you tell a candidate when they're going to run here? It's got to be, why you're running, why specifically, and what can you do, right? And, you understand the community. To Eddie's point, what he just made, you understood the community perfectly there, and you were able to court and, I guess, clearly establish that you were somebody that could be trusted via getting the trust of these entities. And that's a great way to do it. Honestly, that was all like a great plan you had right there. Like, consultants did you well, or that was you, whatever. All in all, that's the best way to do it, right? You understand your community, and then you get their trust via through sophisticated ways of getting entities, and you just communicate with them. Things like,
Eddie, you're the candidate right now. What did your consultants tell you on day one? How they want you to approach the Hispanic vote versus just the vote in general? And I know you come from a very Hispanic community anyway.
Yeah. We're looking at 98% Hispanic in Maverick County, so we didn't focus that much on the Hispanic community, but more on the overall message, more about just being yourself. I think and having a work ethic. We got to talk about the primary first, right? And how was I going to distinguish myself from those two other candidates with a lot more name recognition? Well, it was through a hard work ethic. The Morales family has always stood around. Everybody knows that my dad would be up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, at the tortilla factory, unloading 18-wheelers. And, it's just now common for the community. And it truly is a staple in the community, our business, that everybody goes for the most part on Sundays. And we form lines all the way to the outside. And they've seen me work even after I came back and I was an attorney. My parents wouldn't let me forget that is the business that paid for my undergrad in law school. And so with that help, they see you and they see that you're a humble person, that you don't forget your roots, that you come from the colonias, you still have friends from there. And, my mom still lives in the house and a lot right next door to where we grew up. And it's something that, you cannot recreate. It has to be there, and it's taken a span. I've never run for office, like I mentioned, and to have solidly the support of Maverick County when I was running against the mayor of this same community, who had been the mayor and the council member for close to 18 years in those two capacities, and still be able to beat him, as well as the gentleman from Del Rio, who was a council member also, with a lot of name recognition. I do want to say that for those that are interested, you got to look at funding. I mean, you can't do this, and you got to make sure that you're financially able yourself, or that you're going to have some strong supporters behind you, because it takes money, unfortunately, and it's sad, but that's the way the system is. The other thing is, know your weaknesses again, and it's part of the Sun Tzu. I knew that I didn't have the same connection up there in West Texas as I was going to have in Eagle Pass and in Del Rio. And so what did we do? We decided to really spend a lot of time in Del Rio, as well as in West Texas, visited all 12 counties, took a page from Beto O'Rourke's book of visiting all 254 counties. And that was truly a grassroots campaign. We started off with like 2-3 people at some of these breakfast events or brunch events or dinner events that we would go out to in West Texas. And by the final time that we went around, I mean, there were now crowds, and we had to be putting more chairs at the dining room, restaurant and tables, to accommodate everyone. And it was really nice to see how we had grown just by our messaging.
The funny part is, the more that I hear all of you speaking, the more that it highlights, and especially candidates who are listening to the show tonight and future candidates, it highlights that this is just the fundamentals of campaigning. You just go out, you meet the people where they are, you talk to them about the issues they care about, and that's it. Don't be afraid of your own community. I have seen many candidates be afraid of this community and of other communities, and it makes you kind of feel like, well, how can they possibly represent us if they're afraid of us? Just go out and be part of the community. Just be cool. Just be cool.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Just be normal. Come out, hang out. You'll see we're all normal. We're all regular people. We have regular issues on our mind. But let me ask you all about a concept that Rico and Eddie have talked about already tonight, and that's the colonias. I know a lot of people in Texas are not familiar with this concept, but if you're on the border in Texas, you've definitely experienced and worked with and know what colonias are. Let me let both of you give your perspective on colonias. And Eddie, you kind of just said you kind of grew up in the colonias, so let me let Rico talk first, because I know that he works with them quite a bit. So Rico, why don't you tell us about colonias in Hidalgo County, and what is a colonia?
So, I mean, first off, for folks that are unfamiliar with what a colonia is it's a neighborhood, but one that has not a neighborhood that doesn't have top of the line infrastructure. So it might have an undeveloped road sometimes, or it might have unstable water, and all the things that you come to appreciate for like a suburb, right? That has all the lighting, and maybe there's Wi-Fi throughout the thing. Maybe there's restaurants available. All these things, they're not present there, and so they're out in the outskirts, typically because they're populated more, as you can imagine, by very low income neighborhoods. But really, what a colonia is it's folks often that are in immigrant neighborhoods that are new to at least the area, and they're working extremely hard. Oftentimes supplying all of the basic services and the frontline things that our communities need and depend on. So when it comes to organizing, they are folks that are often low propensity voters, is what I call them, which means that they've not been talked to for sure regarding election stuff. They, you could have a region. I'll just give a neighborhood that, for instance, might have 5,000 eligible potential voters. It might have 20,000 people, 5,000 eligible voters, and then about 900 of them actually even vote. Right? You might have a voter turnout that's like in the 20s, teens even. Now, what is that? That's a challenge. It was a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, like I guess we discussed, because you have to go out there and you have to almost train and develop voting habits in these scenarios. You have to communicate to them what's important, why is voting even relevant, why do they care? They're super busy. They're often working multiple jobs, and they're barely kind of making ends meet. and they're taking care of, you know, families, all of these things. And voting is not on their mind. They don't feel connected at all. So it's about making them feel connected. Like, hey, look, I'm a normal person. I care about you voting because we're getting ignored down here, right? And, you know, this is who these people are. And I'll stop talking for a quick thing, but, you know, Beto O'Rourke was a great candidate because that guy, you know, to what you said, Eddie, he came out a lot. He showed that it was important. You know, he showed through his actions that he cared. And I think that had a profound impact on the voter turnout here.
Eddie, talk to us about colonias.
I think you have to be open and honest with those folks in there. You can't overpromise. They see right through the bull, you know, and so I think they admire you more if you're truthful and honest with them, and that's one of the keys because you know, Rico is completely right. They're hardworking. They're more focused on making sure that they have food and they have enough money to pay for the rent or for their home. And, you know, down on the list is voting to them. But if they know that you are a humble individual and you're one of them, those have been some of the biggest supporters in the primary that I had and right now during the general election of seeking me out, going and getting other folks to go out there and vote. And it's all because of that trust factor. And they need to understand that you won't forget about them and that you never really have, you know, because there are needs that continue throughout it. We still have colonias, even after, 30, 40 years of the colonial legislation to make sure that the subdivision plat, now that a city or a governmental entity had to go through a subdivision plat review process so that we wouldn't have these neighborhoods without the basic infrastructure, water, sewer, gas lines, telephone lines that were all lacking in some of these places. You know, unfortunately, like Rico was saying, usually it's lower income families that are able to afford those lots. And that's why they move in there, and then they're caught at a disadvantage where they don't have the same amenities that one would have in a regular city in a regular neighborhood that did go through the normal subdivision plat process.
And you're bringing out the way that it used to be. You know, the way it used to be was a group of people would get together and put together, you know, 10 houses and whatever they could put together and call it a home. And then after a while, they would petition the U.S. Postal Service to give them an address. And if the Postal Service would just put up a box at the front end of the colonia that could give an address to people, then suddenly they could go petition the county or the city and say, look, we have an address. We're a real home. Now you have to give us a road and lights and sewage and all the things that we are owed as a neighborhood, as a regular neighborhood. In Hidalgo County alone, there are over 300 colonias. Am I correct with that, Rico?
Yeah, that's correct.
And at various stages of development. And so, you know, it's a very interesting concept, but again, a lot of the Democrats who are statewide candidates have failed to visit the colonias and make it a big part of their strategy, which means that they're not connecting with a large segment of our culture. Mm-hmm. Vilma, I don't know if there are any colonias in the Houston area that are like that in that same way. I think this is more of a border kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We don't have colonia in Houston that I know of, but it's a lot of neighborhoods, low income neighborhoods that even the internet is not good. When I moved down in Gulf, that's one of the challenges that I have found out. And exactly like Rico and Eddie have saying, you have to go and talk to them and let them know how you feel and what you can do for them. Don't overpromise, because they're going to take that against you later down the road. Oh, you came down here and you say me, you're going to give me this and that. And look, you already won and you forgot about me. So I always tell the candidates, be real, talk to them straight how it is, and tell them why you need their support. That's one of the main things. And because you cannot tell me that you're going to give me a road and water when you know that this is going to happen in the next 5 years or 4 years. So be realistic, definitely. That way you build that trust between you and those voters.
Again, that's just good advice for any candidate talking to any people, right? I mean, don't overpromise. I don't know how to stress enough that the Hispanic community has been overlooked because we're this scary thing, when in reality we're just regular voters who want to hear the same kinds of things that regular voters want to hear. I don't know. Maybe it's oversimplistic. I've oversimplified it.
I mean, I wanted to throw in something that Eddie mentioned, is just like, I think both of our communities are very similar. They're border towns. We don't think about how to message the Latino community. We just think of how to message our community, because we are the same, 99 percentile, whatever, or whatnot. And it's not, I mean, one thing that you mentioned, Eddie, by mentioning your whole family's history and the way that you kind of, where you came from, I think we hit on it was, it probably wasn't a messaging arm as it was just a theme or just a core value of who you are as a person, right? Who you are as a person. You just communicated that, and that you were, I'm from here. This is what, like, the kind of work that I've done. And that right there resonates, with basically, not all, but, a huge majority of Latinos that are, new into this country, or, if a lot of us are like a few generations removed, kind of just getting here. We all worked, because everyone that got here, they probably came here with very little to nothing. And it's not something that's foreign to us. So we just, a big part of it, if there's any kind of message or theme, it's just, we're here, and as legislators and whatnot, we're going to provide a chance, an opportunity, right? We're not going to forget where we came from. And that's kind of the biggest thing. I think that's what you touched on, Eddie, and I think that was pretty awesome.
Let me ask you all this, and this is the big question that you hear all the time, or the big statement that you hear all the time. The Hispanic community is very conservative. They would be Republican voters if the Republicans weren't so racist. Tell me your thoughts on that. And Eddie, why don't we start with you? You were telling me a story earlier that you're seeing a lot of Trump supporters in your area right now.
Correct. And what was the front part of your question? I'm sorry.
Just that, there's this idea that Hispanic voters are very conservative, and that they would be Republicans if the Republican Party wasn't so racist.
Correct. Yeah. But I was still able to see a number of Hispanics, and I completely understand. There's been a lot of crossover vote in my district, in my election, where you see folks that have actually come out and voted Republican, Hispanic folks here from Maverick County, come up to my tent and tell me I voted everything Republican except you. You're the only Democrat that I voted for. And again, I think it goes back to the messaging and understanding you as a candidate, where you come from, and what you've done, and what they've seen as far as the hard work ethic. And I think that crosses all barriers, where they don't care of your what party affiliation that you have. I don't understand. I have a group, private Facebook group that's made up of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, and we go at it, privately, and we're great friends, and I respect them. We even go on vacation. We've gone on vacations together, and you get to understand a little bit more about why they feel like they would be still Republican supporters or Trump supporters. You don't necessarily have to agree with their views, which many times I don't, but we tend to focus now more. Out of 10 things, for example, if we can focus on 7 things that will bring us together, why are we going to just focus on the 3 things that keep us apart and that drive a wedge between us? And so it's about focusing on those 7 things that we can effectively move forward and get things done, and forget about those 3 things that create so much division.
Vilma, do you see the Hispanic community in Houston rejecting some of the democratic progressive ideas?
Yes, it all depends the area that you work with and the community that you're working with. I don't want to mention any kind of part-time, but if you go up, I don't want to mention, but if you go up to Katy sometime, you can see the difference of the people when you approach them and ask for the Democrat vote, and they say no, no, and I will say it is also the culture, the country that they're coming from. It could be. I have seen that lately in the last 6-7 years in Houston, a lot of Latino going more on the Republican side than a Democrat, but it's those new Latino from different countries that have come here, that they have a different point of view. And that's a debate that we have when we go out, because you think most of the time that you're talking to a Latino is going to be, oh, yes, I'm a Democrat. But you totally get like, shocked, oh, no, Vilma, move on. Like, no, I don't feel that way. I don't think that way. But definitely, I have seen a change on the Latino community on the last 5 to 7 years, and in different part of town as well.
Wow. Rico? I know that your state senator down there, what's his name? Lucio. Senator Lucio is very conservative, one of the most conservative people in Texas, and he's a Democrat, but he's a conservative Democrat, and he has won many, many years in a row. So, what is that all about?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Senator Lucio and Senator Hinojosa, pretty conservative as well. Look at our congressman; you just had both Senator Lucio and Congressman Cuellar had pretty tough challenges from the more progressive side, and both they didn't have handily wins, but they won. And I think that speaks to the question you're asking. I can show you in stats, right? The folks, I think a lot of the messaging of the National Democratic Party is not aligned with things, or it's not that it's opposed to things that we believe or agree with. It's just things that we might not care as much about, to the point of like what people in the colonials are going through. I mean, some of these things that are happening just straight up are not relevant, or like they're not present in the day-to-day lives of folks in there. They're folks there are trying to literally eat, trying to get a job, trying to work hard. And a lot of folks honestly think like, I'm working really hard and I have a chance to keep going up, and it's kind of working. There's been a lot of opportunities for a lot of folks down here, and we take advantage of it, and it works. And so I think a big part of it is to not, to the theme that I mentioned before is it's about not forgetting where you're from. Right. And so a lot of us have, we have access to public education, which is great. We have building these new roads. Our communities are developing at these rapid paces. And what that means is we're literally building our own new homes. And all we want is, to continue building this stuff. And when we're messaging about things that are maybe not that it's opposed, but it's just kind of stuff that doesn't really touch our day-to-day life. So something that I don't want to go as far as say that no one really cares, but I mean, it's not that it doesn't touch your life. I mean, what is your actual care about it? And not to say that Republicans do it much better. If they were to drop some of the more Trumpian things and they were to kind of keep some of their other messaging that they have, they would be pretty formidable. I'm not going to lie, in a lot of these South Texas regions. But at the same time, the Democrats do the exact same thing. We've been doing it. I mean, ultimately, we still are a Democratic region, and there's a reason for that.
Along the same lines, I mean, we see a lot of times Hispanics in Texas who say things like, my family came here the right way, legally, whatever, or we've been here, we've worked our way. Everybody else should have to do it the way we did it, et cetera, et cetera. Or there's no sympathy or no empathy for the people struggling to come here. In the 80s, we used to call, the statement was that there were wetbacks were coming across, because their back was wet from swimming across the Rio Grande. And that was the most outrageous thing you could say about them, was that they were swimming across the river. But now the term wetback, I haven't heard the term wetback in at least 15 years. Now it's just straight up, you're illegal. You're illegals, So it's a change in attitude. It used to be wetbacks, but they get here and that's a fine kind of thing. But now it's illegals. But the Hispanic community has adopted those terms. Even the Hispanic community will call them illegals. What is
the Hispanic community doing that? But it is some within it that are doing it, and it is, and to me personally, it's infuriating. I think to a lot of other folks, because it touches on that point I was saying, is like, folks that are here that are new, they work really hard, and you work hard in America. One of the beautiful things about it is you actually can go up. That's been my family's role, for instance. I can speak to it in a lot of folks that I know. Eddie's too. It sounds like when you get to work hard, you get to keep going up. Now the Republican Party did a good messaging thing, which was they see that, right, that theme and part of our community, and then they kind of injected some kind of toxic waste into it, which is actually you came the right way, therefore. You worked hard, you have this, you value hard work. Well, then you shouldn't value these other people, and you should actually hate them. And they injected hate into the entire discussion, which is infuriating when, it's something that's pretty beautiful. It's like hard work and all these other great things that are very American, and they've kind of muddied the water with it. And now it makes it seem like some of the community, or our entire community, in fact, almost has this we're pulling up the ladder behind us kind of thing.
Eddie, do you feel the same way?
Yes. And what I'd like to add is that we need to hold our elected officials up there in Congress and the president accountable. We had a great opportunity during Obama to be able to pass some immigration reform legislation that was sorely needed in the last 20, 25 years. We needed it even back then. and it didn't get done. And the stories that you hear is that, well, he decided to focus more on the Affordable Care Act. It was going to help more U.S. citizens than immigration reform, one thing at a time. But I think we can walk and chew at the same time. And we need to hold, if Biden wins, we need to hold him accountable, being able to move forward on that, because we need to take that issue away from the division. Remember, it's one of those three subjects that really creates a lot of havoc, a lot of division between everyone. When Republicans and Democrats alike, they all understand and know that we need immigration reform. How we end up there may be different, and obviously there will be a solution if we reach across the aisle. If there's a fee that has to be paid, if they have to serve for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, where they have a stellar record, they can't get in trouble, whatever it is, whatever parameters we put in place, we can discuss those. But the fact that it has not even been brought up for a vote is what causes this constant division, and Republicans have known really well on how to use it to create that division. Look at all the caravan, in the midterm elections that they used to scare everyone to go out and vote. The caravan issue, and never really formalized in a big, the way it was being, put out there in the press for us. But those are the things, like, we need to hold Biden, and even if it's Trump that gets reelected, my immigration friend of mine that does immigration law, once Trump, the silver lining that he said he found when Trump was elected, every major immigration reform in the last 30 years had taken place under a Republican presidency. And that's because, the Democrats, we're going to be behind it. But with a Republican president, they wanted to take the credit, and they did it under Ronald Reagan, under George Bush 1, under George Bush 2, to much lower levels. But now is the time more than ever to make sure that we address it, get rid of it. It will no longer be an issue, and we move forward and deal with the other substantive issues such as jobs, education, renewable energy. How do we work also with oil and gas, for example, here in District 74? It's not going to go away, immediately, but we need to find, even Pecos and Reeves counties, which is the highest oil and gas producers in Texas, those two counties, they are the highest renewable energy sources right now with solar and wind power. They already know, the judges there, the commissioners court, they're getting ready for the 21st century, and they have, and that's great, and that's admirable, and that's what we need.
Vilma, let's ask you the same question, get back to it. The idea that really, I got mine, and so you need to do it the right way. Is this an attitude you're seeing in the Houston area, in the Hispanic community?
Yes, totally. And like I say, Houston is so diverse, and you have so many different areas that you get to see that in most of the cases. Like, I live in the barrio, but now I live in somewhere else because I got my way. I worked this and that, and I got to another level right now. But they don't get back to see the people who they left behind. And they don't even go to the barrio. I don't mean that's everybody, but a good amount of it. Yes, totally. Here, you get to see a lot discrimination among us. I will say, español, mira esta, ahora. It's a lot. They I don't know how to explain, but yes, if I did it the hard way, everybody have to go the same way. I don't gonna give them nothing because, no. So, but it's, and like you say, here is so many different levels of areas and neighborhoods and society, and that is hard to compare one with another, but definitely it's a lot of discrimination among us, and we don't like to help each other sometimes. Yeah, it is true. Yeah. That's what you get to see when you start knocking on doors and walk in different neighborhoods. I'm just trying to be realistic of what's going on out there.
I'm gonna ask you all some questions from the audience. It's already the 8 o'clock hour. There's several questions that have been coming in, and so what we're going to try to do is limit you to 30-second answers, which makes it a little bit difficult. But we want to get as many of their questions in as possible. So when you see my hand go up, really try to wrap up real fast. And this first question is a kind of a basic question that we've already been talking about anyway, but I'll sum it up. It's a long question, but I'll sum it up by saying a lot of campaigns make the mistake of lumping Hispanics into one single monolithic column, which we're not. Rico, talk about the differences between the folks. Vilma said earlier, they're coming in from all different countries and we have to treat them differently. Talk to us about that, Rico.
Yeah, we're incredibly diverse. We're huge. Yeah, we make up a majority of the public education system, but at the same time, there's a difference between a rural Latino, a border Latino, or Latinx individual, right? How you even say it is one thing that's really big. And the ones in the urban dense areas like in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, we're all different. We have different experiences. Some of us have been here for one generation. Some of us have been here. We've been here since the beginning, and it's very different. And the way that you understand that, we're real people that have normal issues, that'll have a big impact.
Eddie?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I agree. We're kind of homogeneous here, in Maverick, 98%, Hispanic, first generation, second generation, like my parents and myself. But it's just a matter of making sure that they can feel that you're really working to better their lives on a daily basis.
Vilma?
Yeah, here in Houston is totally different. You have to have different message for different constituents. So that's something that you have to look at it. What neighborhood you're gonna be talking to, what even country they're coming from. So you have to really know what is the message that you're going to be using when you go and talk to the Latinos. And like you say, Eddie, if it's first, second, third generation, or who we are that we're talking right now. If it's at 18 years old, 22 years old, or if at 65 years old. So it's a totally different message that we have to put out there when we're talking to the Latino people.
Say it again, Rico.
The position in life we're in changes pretty quickly when we're in the United States. I grew up on a goat farm, and now I'm a lawyer. Very different.
Yeah. Well, and in Harris County, which is Houston, the county judge is a Hispanic Latina, but she's from Colombia.
Yeah.
So you would never 20 years ago have thought that the first Hispanic county judge in Harris County would be from Colombia. You would have thought Mexico for sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah. Let me ask the next question. So the pandemic has really changed outreach. Has the pandemic really hit the Hispanic communities of your area in a harder way, especially probably the low-income areas? Actually, Vilma, let's start with you and go that way.
Yep. Definitely it's been hard to be doing the reach out. And this year, due to the pandemic, it's now got social media and different other way of communication, like I'm not gonna say name, but the texting way and many other way, because it definitely is hard. You don't gonna put your canvassers out there in the field taking any kind of risk, and you don't want to risk also the border. So it's been a tough year. I think we have delivered the message. We've been working hard, but it's more on the social media side, I think, and emails.
Rico?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Your socioeconomically disadvantaged communities have been probably harder by COVID.
Yeah, so COVID, I mean, it is you can't even be understated. It's been one of the biggest things that has impacted our community and my generation for sure. Hidalgo County at one point had a hospital full. Our hospitals were at capacity. We had mass graves and kind of situation going on for essentially the month of July. So we have individuals with comorbidities at significant rates here. So it impacted us pretty substantially. I have many friends that have lost family members, and it has been tragic. So we've taken it very seriously. And I would just say this: when the governor reopened the state, knowing how it impacted disparately minority populations, and he did so without having a mask order, knowing that the mask could reduce how much the spread of this virus would have on our communities, because he was listening to like a few hundred people that didn't want to wear masks, he literally just left us out to dry and put us in like incredibly vulnerable things. So now I'm super passionate about, and everybody in these border areas that got impacted, we have people that literally died because he wanted to not inconvenience a few people that were close to him, that were not his community. And that's what happens when our communities don't vote. Something like that happens. So that's how it impacted us.
Eddie?
Yeah, and I'd like to add, at the end of the day, that Hispanics, they understand hierarchies, and they understand at the end of the day, they may not agree with the governor, but he is our governor, for example. And so they tend to listen and tend to abide by, whatever the governor is saying. So if the governor was reopening, for example, a lot of Hispanics will feel that deference of, well, if the governor says it's okay, then it must be okay. Not really taking the time to educate them and make sure that we're taking care of their health and their safety. As city attorney for the last 17 years, and immediately, this thing, we won the primary in a week or 2 weeks after. That's when the whole thing shut down with the pandemic. We stayed till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, drafting legislation on the local disaster declarations. And it seemed like every other day, the governor kept changing the ball on us as to what was okay and what was not okay. And that's what kept us, my firm, my partners, working on the drafting of legislation so we can remain consistent and have, stay within the parameters and stay within the constitutional requirements, and that would allow for these local disaster declarations. But it really sent the message home. And I know that some people will disagree with me, but I do hold, again, just like I would hold Biden and Trump accountable for not pushing immigration reform in this next 4 years. Also the governor for not really thinking forward and really wanting to make a change that was going to help everyone, including the border communities.
So staying on the topic of COVID, this voter wants to know, did COVID impact negatively voting turnout? So voting turnout's at an all-time high in Texas right now. So it's an interesting question. Would it have even been higher had it not been for COVID?
For sure. If I can, I'd like to answer that first because I just dealt with it 3 or 4 days ago. You have somebody that's in quarantine that's reaching out to me and saying, I'm in quarantine, but I want to vote. How do I vote? They can't go. They can't do the car vote because they're supposed to be in quarantine and inside the house. And then there's these steps that they needed to follow in order for them to do the mail-in ballot. And then that was the same day that person reached out to me was the deadline. So we're scrambling to get them the application, making sure that they, he hasn't told me how he's going to vote and I haven't asked him how he's going to vote. But the message is, we need you to vote, regardless of whether you vote for me or not. I would hope, that they voted for me. But, it's about making sure that our local community has that. And so I know for a fact that he's not the only isolated problem in Texas or in our district, and that there are more people like that, or that they're taking care of. Maybe they don't have COVID, but their family members do, and they also have to be in quarantine, or they have to be, safe and not really go out.
Vilma, would the vote count have been even higher in our communities?
Yes, 300%. Yes, I don't have an exact amount numbers, but definitely, totally, way more of what we usually have seen in other years.
Rico.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'd echo what everyone just said. I mean, the fact that COVID pushed a lot of people to want to do it in mail-in ballots or drive-thrus and whatnot. But I mean, we should not forget also the literal structural obstacles that the governor has put into place to actually stop and kind of reduce the amount of people that can actually vote. Knowing that a lot of us are out of fear, just aren't going to be, not out of fear, but out of just general good practices, it's going to suppress and depress our vote. Because they understand that when more people vote, they're not as popular of a party, they're going to lose, and that's a big impact on our community and the local now.
So another impact on the community, and we always see that people talk about how Democrats aren't winning because Democrats aren't even running for office. Well, the same could be said about Hispanic community, and this voter is asking, how can we get Hispanics to run for office? Eddie, what? You're everybody, I guess, is Hispanic in your area, so everybody is running is by default Hispanic. But what got you to run, or what makes a Hispanic want to run? What can we do to get Hispanics across the state of Texas to run for statewide office, for example? I mean, look, you're running for your first office here, and it's a state house rep office. But why didn't you run for a railroad commissioner, or why didn't you run for something statewide?
Good question. I wasn't ready. I mean, had it not been for Poncho Nevares deciding not to run, he's a current incumbent, and opening up that window, I probably would have figured, well, maybe 4 or 6 years. I've always liked government, but not really. I was not really driven to, okay, I know that I'm going to run right away. And it was really mostly, family members, friends, and local small business owners, the bank presidents that reached out to me, and they're like, look, man, you are the best person in Maverick County for this spot. We cannot let other folks do this. And I'm like, I don't need it. And I don't need that, label of state rep. I'm fine where I am. I'm busy running different, family companies, as well as a law firm and our tortilla factory. But at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself and figure out, okay, God put you in this place, and God gave you these opportunities and put you through UT and St. Mary's Law and having a family, 2 beautiful girls, 1 beautiful son, and it's for a reason. And now it's your time to give back to the community. And really, at the end of the day, when I sat down, it was to give back to the community.
Rico, let me ask you the same question. How do we get more Hispanics to run, especially for statewide office? I mean, 2022 is coming up. There's a governor's race. Do we get the Castro brothers to run, or is there someone else that can, or is this going to be Beto's race to win or lose?
I'll say this: why we haven't run is because we're new. Every single day our numbers go up, and every single day there are more and more of us. I'll say this: your question is, we haven't run yet, but we're coming. There's going to be a lot of us. I'm pretty young, and I know a lot of folks that are involved in the legislature, involved in politics. I'm the result of my mother, who was a grassroots organizer who ran stuff, and my community was 99% Hispanic, but we had an all-white board. So my mom kind of pushed against that, and because of her activism, is why I got involved, and it's why I am where I am. I give everything to her. And there's gonna be guys that are much better, women that are gonna be much better than me, that are younger than me, and we're gonna keep running. And I think we'll see a very, very different statewide picture in a few decades.
Vilma, how do you see it? And especially Latinas.
I totally agree with Rico. It's going to be, this upcoming year is going to be totally different. Something that I want to ask, that we need all those new people coming into there, those more seasoned and more people with experience, giving the support and the guidance for the new people that is coming, feel more strong to go to the next step. So that's, I think it's gonna be some interesting year. I think we're gonna have some great candidate Latinos and Latinas coming up. So guys, call me if you need some help. I will be here. On the back of the scene.
Along that same line, in 2018, we saw the first Hispanic women win for Congress in Texas, and 2 of them at the same time, one from El Paso, one from Houston. Why did it take till 2018 to get a female to win? And they didn't even really win. Well, I mean, in El Paso, she won in a Hispanic area, but on the border, I mean, Eddie, down where you're at, why don't we have more females running and winning in these larger spots? And Rico, let me start with you this time.
I'll say it. I mean, it's something that's not very popular, but I mean, we haven't had the power. The power was taken from us in a lot of ways. By day, I mean, the white population in the state of Texas has run this place, right? Down here in the Rio Grande Valley, I'll say for our situation, they took a lot of our land, they took a lot of our power, and took a lot of our money. We had to build up piece by piece, generation by generation, but I think we built it back up. And why we haven't run, because it's something that Eddie said, it takes money to run. Right, and our people have been working up the ranks, and we've collected a good amount of money now, and I think we're going to start winning. And like I said, we're coming. We something is afoot that cannot be stopped. We are, from every corner of this state, there are Latinos and Latinas that are pretty badass, that are not afraid, and they're going to run. Whether like the top down folks, the top echelon folks want us to be there or not, they're going to run against them, and I bet you they're going to beat them. And it's going to be pretty interesting.
Vilma, you were there for Sylvia Garcia. You helped Sylvia get elected.
Yeah, I did all her field and from banking. I took time into a lot of work, a lot of effort. It was a teamwork, and we got it. And she's there for us. And I'm so proud of all the Latinas that we have on the state rep, the House district, and all those congresswoman and everyone, because it takes the time, and you have to really be strong to hold that position and be the voice for us down here just waiting for you to do it. So, and I really say thank you to all of them, and Eddie for you running on 74. Rico, I will see you soon up there.
Eddie, why don't we see more women running in your area, especially Latinas?
I agree with Rico. Also, it's a matter of funding, financial constraints. And although I do want to take extreme pride in knowing some of these very fine women that make up the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals out of San Antonio and South Texas. And if they can do it, and it's all made up of female judges, then that shows. And there was a few years back when they were all able to get in there. They've done a marvelous job, and they've been super efficient. It just shows the power that women have, and hopefully we'll see more and more, because we definitely need to see them, especially up in Congress, when you have this sort of legislation where, you know, you can't have regular access to some of these healthcare issues for women, for example, basic healthcare needs, and yet you still are able to have like Viagra, for example, for men that's included in insurances, or, you know, I'm sorry for the audience members here, but penile implants that are fully paid by Medicare. How can you have that sort of disjointed, you know, effect where men are treated differently from women? And so hopefully with more and more women up there in Congress, we can change the laws.
But, you know, now that you're talking about the female judges in Harris County, in 2018, we saw a historic number of Black female judges get elected. And statewide, we've seen this. The Black community seems to hold their women up in a high regard more and more and more and more. The Hispanic community is not there yet. And that's really the crux of this. What is it that's holding us back from holding our women up, you know, as intelligent and smart and worth following? Rico, let's go with you on that one.
I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, there's an obvious answer, of course. Sometimes, like, I think our culture has a machismo kind of realm to it that it does impact it. But I think that's kind of in the old days. It's definitely not existing in my generation. And I'll say the Fourth Court of Appeals is a lot of women. So does the 13th Court. The 13th Court of Appeals, those women are badass. I clerked for one back when I was in law school, and she was awesome. She taught me a lot. I'd learned how to write from her. They're brilliant. I give it all to them as well. There are a lot of, I think, just Latino here, at least in South Texas and in the state, that are around 40, 50 years old, that are really badass, and they're not afraid of anything, and they're going after it. Carol Alvarado over in Houston, I used to work for her as well. She's a badass. She doesn't really give in to anything. And they're, in the past, yes, the cultural realm impacted, I think, Latinas. But I think right now there's women out there right now that are not afraid, and that are really, they're equal, and they honestly know they're better than a lot of men out there, and they're going after it. So you're going to see them coming too.
Eddie, what do we need to do to support our women?
I think as soon as I agree with Rico on the cultural issue, there being the machismo, thank God, you know, that we've moved away, the second generation. Even my kids, even they see it more. And I'm challenging even my two girls. What are you going to do, and how effective are you going to be for the community? You've been put in a certain place of prestige already, just by virtue of the hard work from your grandparents as well as mine. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to let it all go to waste, or do something much more effective? And how involved do you want to get to be? I think just aligning people, especially these machistas that still hang around, and just letting them know and reminding them of their mother, and how much they love their mom, and how much they care for her, and how much they did for them as their kids. I think it sends the message of, oh yeah, you know what? I need to be more respectful about women and the position, and hold them. And remember, I mean, education has a lot to do with it. And it's just the last 30, 40 years is when we've seen a lot more women. You know, I saw some data where for the first time, I think women now make up more of the 50% or more of the students in law school. When, you know, we were listening to the notorious RBG, she graduated #1 and she couldn't get a job in New York, you know, not too long ago. So that's impressive, and hopefully we'll continue to make strides.
Vilma, you are a strong female Latina working in politics. How do you see it? I mean, do you feel the male suppression? Do you feel held back sometimes? Do you feel like closing your mouth sometimes in places where I know I've seen you close your mouth a couple of times.
It's changing now. I mean, just take care of the show. Like we don't stay home, pick up children and cook anymore. We do that, and we go to school, and we get educated, and we run for office, and we do anything that it needs to be done. Why? Because we want to make the difference. What I'm asking is all you guys to push us to be the next leader. And like I say before, also for those most seasoned and already elected officials to give us the guidance and the support to get, and definitely money to run any campaign.
You know, it's so sad, but money is at the root of a lot of these problems. And you're right. We don't have generational wealth to build on to be able to catapult us into these higher arenas. And when we ask for help, you know, it's like the crab story that you've heard. Some people call it the lobster story, where, you know, you put the crabs in the bucket and you don't even have to put a lid on the bucket because they're not going to escape. The crabs below them will just hold them back. And that's attributed to the Hispanic community quite a bit, that story. You know, you don't even have to put a lid on. You don't even have to tell people that they can't do it because the Hispanics will hold themselves back. Is that still true today, or is that changing? Hopefully it's changing. But Eddie, let's start with you. What do you think on that? Are we holding ourselves back?
To a certain extent, yes. And in some communities, you know, you get to see it. And at the end of the day, it's about having those frank discussions with those people in opposition, you know, and maybe reminding them again that, hey, we're 98%, you know, Hispanic in this community. You know, we may not agree on all this, on all the issues, but let's forget about the past and, you know, politically what, you know, where you stood on one candidate or the other, and let's move the community forward. And let's focus on that. And again, going back to the example, if you have 7 issues that you're aligned with, even within the Hispanic, let's focus on those and not on the 3 that divide us.
Mm-hmm.
Vilma, are we holding ourselves back?
Yes, I totally agree on that. And I won't say that 100%, but it's a few of the people that they don't let us be what we need to be for one reason or another. But I think, like Eddie was saying, it's just coming back to let's fight for this together. We are 98%, like Eddie said. We can be in a different position if we support each other.
Yeah,
like all the culture do. Like
I think it could be like this. We have, you know, we have 1/10 of the power maybe, but we have, you know, 40, maybe 50% of the population, and we're just kind of, we're all fighting over, you know, who's on top of that 1/10. Let's go for the whole pie. And there's more than enough cookies in the cookie jar for us all to eat.
Yeah.
We don't have time for this kind of Mexican crab stuff that kind of happens. And it does happen in my experience. It's happening in the older generations. My generation's not really having it, but some of the more innovative older folks, they don't really deal with it either. So it's going away slowly. And I think folks that kind of, as they get emboldened, right? And I think it's coming, we're on the horizon of an opportunity where everyone sees it. It's right there. It's in the cusp. We can see the light and we're going after it. And I think that Mexican crab stuff can kind of go out the, you know, it's going to go at the wayside as we go after what's ours.
So going after what's ours, I remember in 2015, in October of 2015, going down to the station down in San Antonio where Hillary Clinton came and made an appearance, and it was with the Castro brothers. And at that experience, there was the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce did an interview with her, and then outside there was a rally with the Castro brothers. And in that interview, and you can go back and look at the interview, she all but promised that the Castro brothers that Julian was going to be her running mate. And we were ecstatic in October of 2015, thinking that we were finally going to have one of ours running for vice president. And then it didn't happen. And the person that she chose had been to Brownsville a lot in the last 30 years, is well known. I first met him in Brownsville, and speaks Spanish, the whole 9 yards, but he's a Southern white governor. And, that was not the Castro brother that was promised to us. How do we get out there and grab?
I mean, I'll just say it really quickly. That was a big problem. 2015, it was something that was being given to us, right? And what's going to happen is that we're going to take it. And it's going to be one of our people that actually runs. And Instead of someone that's genuinely a part of us, who is someone like us, not someone who's a piecemeal. Like, oh, I speak Spanish or this or that, and nothing against those people, because we love that. That's awesome. But there are just so many of us at this point. We're just going to be someone just competing for the top spot, not the top Hispanic. It's just someone just competing, and it's invariably going to be someone like that. And so, how do we do it? It's just by going out and getting it, and someone's going to do it, because there's a lot of really badass Hispanics out there.
Eddie?
It's about demanding a seat at the table. I think our time has come, and we need to spread that message. Maybe some of the older generational Hispanics are still not there. They feel that we need to, that's our place. You got to go sit at the end of that table. Don't move unless we tell you, and we're not there.
Yeah.
We're not there anymore, and we need to make it known. And we need to let the folks at the Democratic Party also know that we need to be taken seriously, and that we expect to be placed in those positions of power.
Vilma?
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you guys. But I think also one of the things that we have to work together, like you were saying, in order to see where is the step that we're going to take in the future.
Let me ask
because
one
if
more.
I start doing it just on myself and adding the stuff, if we don't sit down and work, going to the next step, it's going to be a little bit harder. But if we all unify and go for the next step that we're planning to take as a community, then it's going to be way much easier for us to get to our goals.
So let me ask one last audience question, and then we'll do a wrap-up sequence. But this one comes from, let's see. The audience member says, AOC is showing that young immigrant folks that run can win and do great things. How do we convince first and second generation Latinos to run for office? So we've talked about getting Latinas to run. We've talked about Latinos in general, but how do we get those first and second generation folks to run? Rico, let's just start with you.
Make them feel comfortable. I mean, it's not, his thing is, it's not something that we're going to do. It's something that they're going to do. And how they're going to do it when we just give everyone respect. If everyone, like AOC, she isn't really an immigrant so much as she's an American, right? And she, of course, we're from immigrant descent, just like myself. But we're here, right? We're working we see ourselves almost like we're on even footing. And it's a lot easier when you're from a community like mine, it's 99% Latino. I don't really feel like I'm different. I feel like I just am something, right? So when we're going for it, it's because it's my community, and I'm running my own community. I think how we have people do that is that they're just they feel like it's appropriate. They don't feel like they're foreign.
Eddie, how do we get those first and second generations to get involved?
Involved is one thing to be candidate. I think is another. You're asking too much. I think at this point still for a first or second generation, when they have to have that generational wealth, they have to have the funding to be able to do that. But we can definitely make it a little bit more possible by making sure that we set up either a PAC or some sort of association that caters to making sure that we have candidates with a Hispanic background, and then also making sure that we are selective in who we choose within that association or PAC to run, because you got to have a qualified candidate. You just can't have it. And that could be a teacher, a professor, a doctor, a small business owner, but they have to have the right qualities, the right background, the strong work ethic, and understanding, having a good grasp of the issues at hand. Otherwise, it's all for naught and we're just wasting our money.
Vilma, how do we get those first and second generations to?
Definitely giving the support. And like Eddie was saying, we have to also, when we're going to push someone to be a candidate, we have to see the values and we have to see what is important for them. Also, we have to, and the main thing also is the value, the education, because we have to put somebody who really is going to be there to represent us, but we come all the way to the end. Where are we going to get the funds if we don't have a PAC, or we don't have somebody who support you, or one of those seasoned and all candidates or elected officials that's trying to move on to support the new coming generation? So I think it's many things that I say we need to sit down, talk together, and plan our future and our goals. That way we can work together to make that happen. And how we're going to get the money to help and support that next candidate and second second generation. I think
Well,
it's the
and we're out of time, but Eddie is running, and on Tuesday he's going to be elected. But let's give him the last minute here. Eddie, why don't you take the last minute, talk to your constituents, talk to Texas, raise some money for yourself.
Oh, God. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I just want to thank each and every one of you. You're in District 74, and if you still are undecided, please go to moralesfortexas.com. You can visit us with the same handle on Facebook and on Twitter. You can see where we stand on the issues. I have the most endorsements from regular men and women that form either these associations or these PACs. You can see them on my website. You can see where I stand on the issues, and you can see that I have the grassroots support from these associations and just the community at large. I think I am the best qualified candidate, not only with the small business background, my attorney background for the last 20 years, and then also several other businesses that I run that all deal with either developers, contractors, residential construction, commercial properties, and warehouses. And I think that breadth of experience is what makes me unique and the best person for House District 74. So please go out and vote. Don't go by yourself. Make sure in some of these places where there's paper ballots that you turn and vote the back of the ballot. That's super important. A lot of the local races are in the back. Don't forget us. And when you get to District 74, vote for Eddie Morales for Texas House District 74. Thank you for providing me this forum and this opportunity.
Great. And thank you to all of you guests for coming tonight. We have a lot more discussions in the future, I'm sure. And y'all have a lot of work in the next few days to do. I know y'all took a lot of your time out tonight, and I appreciate that. So thank y'all. And audience, we'll see you Sunday. So
it was great talking to all y'all.